Hey, you are listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm usually the quiet guy here, Billy.
Well, you've been upgraded. So I'm the other guy, Josh, the other host. Mark is not here with us, but we are joined by some friends that we've had on the show in the past. Please help us in welcoming, all the way from across the pond, Leo-x-Robertson and Tom-Montgomery.
Hello.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
How's it going?
This one's not as exciting as your last one, so
Oh.
you guys did
I
get
tend to get that effect, yeah.
deathgasm with us last time.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming and thanks for being here. So you guys are doing a very special event with Victims and Villains on August 31st. You guys are coming back to the States, and we have a special curation of some of y'all's work, some of which have played in the past at Horrific Hope. Some of them that also no one's ever seen outside of the crew making it. Tell us a little bit about these films.
Sure. Let me see what we've got. Like you mentioned, we've got the short film that played at Horrific Hope, What's Bad Luck to a Club Like Ours. It's one we made last year. Then there's Searching for Veslemoy, which you also played, which we had the pleasure of seeing with you in the cinema.
Yeah.
There's Mr. Sleepy. And then Cherophobe is the latest one. It's the newest one, which we made just last Christmas. It was an international collaboration with a writer friend of ours who lives in South Carolina. And it will be brand new to anyone who comes.
So we have a world premiere.
It is a world premiere,
Yeah.
Yo. So I remember walking out of the theater this past spring when we showed What's Bad Luck to a Club Like Ours, and Solomon, who's one of our volunteers, we were talking about it later in the day, and this film is really interesting when it plays at a festival like ours, because the majority of the films that you see at Horrific Hope are very horror driven, whereas this one is very mental health, and was really glad to have a chance to program this one. This one's probably, out of every film that we're showing of the four, this one's probably the heaviest thematically. Can you guys talk about crafting something that is surprising like this, but also like extremely mature, and just kind of exploring these really deep thematic themes?
Tom, what are your thoughts? I've spoken a bit already.
Well, Leo wrote this movie, and when I read it, my first thought was, this is like a Black Mirror episode, or this is something that I would really like to watch. This is something that would surprise me, and it's very odd. And there's many different ways we can make this movie. And I think the kind of the straight, kind of almost deadpan telling of it, just straight up, here it is. Here's all the characters one after another telling their stories. And seeing it that way kind of makes the ending even more shocking. And for my part, someone who's not a professional actor, I think I put the most effort into this, and thinking about who this guy is, and having a kind of a backstory, and having lots of things that aren't explained in the movie, in order to kind of know how I should behave. When I'm interacting with all the other characters, it's hard to talk about it without giving too much away, without actually ruining it. Yeah, and the soundtrack, I had actually I'd recorded a bunch of ambient music just in a project completely separate to this, and that was called Music for Crumbling Worlds. And it was the first time I'd tried to write a kind of like a classical score, but only played with synth music, and it was written as a requiem or kind of a series of funeral marches. So it kind of had the right tone to it, and Leo thought that the music fitted it really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Right, Tommy.
No, you're good. Sorry, Leo.
No, it's cool. No, I think Tom did a great job of taking the character seriously. I think everyone did a great job in their performances. It was really, as you know, with our style where we cast people that we already know. I guess when I was writing it, I was probably thinking of who was going to be in it, and that it could be a showcase of each of their talents. And I was pleased to hear that most people couldn't really guess where it was going. And also that everyone really understood that it was kind of a sincere ode to the power of community, even though it's twisted in the way that it is.
Yep.
That it is about that I do really believe that if you find a community wherever you are, you can thrive and we can look after one another. But in this case, again, without spoiling it, it doesn't necessarily work out.
I think for me as a programmer, one of the things that I was really interested in, I've had the pleasure of really seeing your craft evolve over the years, whether that's a more conversational piece like burnt portraits, or kind of the next selection that we're talking about, which is Searching for Veslemoy, and even moving from Bad Luck to Veslemoy. Veslemoy is this like really almost kind of like comedy mockumentary that kind of feels like a piece at a time, to where it feels like the kind of humor that's involved with this one is very much feels like late 2000s, early aughts. Can you talk about capturing something like that and kind of crafting comedy? Because for me as a viewer, like just thinking back to every film I've seen of yours, this is kind of the big one that I think that this is the only time I remember like really seeing you kind of dive into comedy.
Veslemoy. That was really Tom. Maybe you can talk about this one as well. We brainstormed this one over Christmas out of boredom, really.
Yeah. So I mean, I think like all my favorite movies and TV shows, it's maybe like I think what first got us into films was comedy, and my favorite genre is definitely the mockumentary, from Spinal Tap to kind of British shows like The Day to Day and Brass Eye, and I think what drove her to do it was that we're struggling to find somebody who was willing to be kind of like the leading character, or like turn up every single day for filming. And I said, well, I can't do a serious role. I can't make myself cry on camera. I can't run on camera. Like I can't be an action star. Like I can't be a romantic lead. But
He's just talking himself out of the job.
Yeah, but what I can do is like be the presenter of a mockumentary and act like a really horrible guy, and be the kind of the villain. You know, like in wrestling, I think it would be the most fun to be the heel rather than the hero guy. And that's kind of how I approached it. And when we were writing it, I just thought, like what are the worst traits in everyday humans that this guy could have? He could be sleazy, he could be a bit sexist, he could be condescending, a little bit racist. Like he could have all these elements that are just the worst of people that you see every day. And we just kind of we just wrote it around that, and then everybody else who agreed to be in the movie, we just kind of took who they were and found a location and just ad-libbed me interacting with them.
So the the actual like premise of Searching for Veslemoy circles around this mockumentary, essentially documentarian that is trying to solve a cold case. And one of the things that, as we kind of progress in the lineup, which brings us to Mr. Sleepy, which is this it kind of has that same vibes, but it's taken a lot more seriously and almost kind of feels like it is this commentary on how society belittles men, specifically within the LGBT community. And, you know, that's one of the things that I've always really respected and really liked about your guys's style of filmmaking, is that you never quite know what you're going to get. Everything just kind of feels like a surprise. But can you kind of talk about talking specifically about taking a subject like bigotry and bringing it into this light of kind of like slasher / commentary?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that, as you know, like, we make our films using the Stavanger Filmmakers Club, which is a club I started and that Tom's been a big part of for the whole time, where we invite ordinary people to be part of our films. And I think that people feel limited by money in filmmaking, definitely. And so one of the fun projects for us to demonstrate what we could do, what can we do next, how far can you go with as little as you have, is really fun for me to demonstrate. I think people find it inspiring, and so and we certainly feel compelled to keep making films by making something different each time. Also, I have a kind of workman-like relationship to filmmaking, in that I always just want to be working on something. And so when it came to Mr. Sleepy, I think that I had this script that it was based on a short story of mine that had gotten into a fancy anthology, and I thought, okay, people like this story of the things I've written. I bet I could adapt this into something a bit longer. And it was something that was quite personal, because the short story at least was based in London. Of course, we don't live in London, we couldn't film it there, so I just adapted it to happen anywhere, more or less. But it was something that was going on in London. It was something that had affected friends of mine had gone out to parties and had their drinks spiked and not wanted to talk about it because they were men, like you say, because they were gay men. It was just really, it was a very uncomfortable thing. And so it was a story about how bigotry is literally deadly, and how scary that is. I think that the way that we work and how it's interacted with your message as a mental health filmmaker is that we are talking about real fears based in real things that happen, and so that was that was a difficult one to work on as well, I think.
Yeah, I would say, because it's a really difficult film also to watch. It's really thematically heavy. I remember, because I growing up as a cis, heterosexual male, like I didn't have a lot of friends growing up that were in the LGBT community, and so I didn't like understand the gravitas of that until I started actually doing mental health advocacy. And I had actually met a trans my friend Sasha, who's a trans individual, kind of really had this like really long heart-to-heart and education, and it was kind of like really eye-opening to kind of see it. And so to be able to program stories that are giving filmmakers that are using their voice to tell those stories is something that's really important, and it's really personable, and it's something that also I think needs platforms to be spoken as well.
Very cool. I think it's a very cool thing that you're able to do, and kudos to you for having those difficult conversations.
Yeah, they are very, very difficult. So the last one is a world premiere. I, as of this recording, have not watched it yet. I have a copy in it, and I will watch it before.
Nice.
Maybe I'll experience it with the audience. But it's called Cherophobe. What are people going to be able to expect with this one? Tell us a little bit about what the story is about, and yeah.
Sure. Again, I think that it's where our filmmaking excels, and that it's very personal. It's a personal story from a friend of ours called Bo, who lives in South Carolina. He wrote it because he likes our films, and he thought it was something that we could do. and he very kindly waited for a long time until I could get people together over Christmas to make it. And it's very simple. It's a bit like a one-act play that takes place in one room, where a writer is struggling with how to carry on in his life after a difficult breakup, and he ends up assisted by a voice that starts talking to him, and he doesn't know where it comes from. I can say that much. And so the dialogue that evolves with the voice explains who this writer is and where he is in life. And it's a really beautiful story. It was lovely for me to direct something that I hadn't written, that was my voice as a filmmaker, as I think you can tell, it comes out quite cruel a lot of the time. And this one was incredibly sweet and compassionate, and it was fun to be part of something like that. And I hope that comes across.
Well, I'm very excited to eventually watch it, but also on the flip side of that, something that we also can hear is that, Tom, you also wrote the score for this film as well. Can you talk about crafting a score for the film?
Well, it was funny how it came about, because after I got to read the script, and I was originally going to help out with the filming of it, but then Leo put together like it's a one-man cast in a one room, and he had a great director of photography who did a fantastic job on it. So then I kind of stepped back and decided I wasn't going to come to any of the filming at all. So then I reached out to Leo and said, can I do the soundtrack for this one as well? Like I've done for his other ones. And then the writer, Bo, actually had another band in mind. And so I contacted Bo and said, if it doesn't work out with this other group of musicians, could I step in? And luckily it fell through. And then Bo sent us like a lot of the examples of the music that he liked from his friends in South Carolina. And it was kind of all this kind of psychedelic rock stuff. So I kind of made like one or two examples of like what I could do with psychedelic rock, and sent it to Leo. And Leo was like, nah, like we're not doing psychedelic rock. He was like, we're going to do like this really stripped down, sparse acoustic guitar, kind of minimalist. So I went kind of roots with it. I went kind of like folk music and like a little bit blues. But it's it was really, really nice. So I kind of revisited kind of lots of little motifs and melodies that I've been playing around with for a long time that haven't really fitted into like a classic film score. And yeah, over the course of about a week, I sat in the basement and just did the usual thing where I record 3 or 4 minutes, sent it to Leo and said, is this something? And Leo would be like, yeah, you're on the right path. And then I would clean it up. And yeah, it was a lovely one to make. And it just came out on Spotify today, because I'd actually post-dated the release of it in like February or something. It was like right at the start of this year, so I'd actually forgotten about it. Then when I got up this morning, like I had an email from Spotify saying like, your new album is out. Do you want to do something to promote it? And I did the usual thing, which is kind of just ignore that email and say not really, and go and do my day job. But it is out there if anyone wants to hear it.
Yeah, you should check out a lot of Tom's music. It's very soothing. It's very... I don't know why I want to always say this. It gives me David Lynch vibes. And I loved it, man. I remember the first time I was listening to it, I was driving and I had to change it because it was starting to like relax me to like where I wasn't like aware of other drivers. And I was just like, this is probably dangerous.
That's really high praise to compare me to Lynch's soundtracks. Thanks very much.
Of course. Well, if you guys are interested you guys live in the Richmond area and or the surrounding areas, these gents are gonna be in person, and we've got a entire curation. Like we said, we're going to be showing 3 feature films, including a world premiere of Cherophobe, and also the short film What's Bad Luck to a Club Like Ours, on August 31st at the Richmond Public Library at 101 East Franklin Street here in Richmond. The event is free. Not only do we have great films and filmmakers to boost, but we have a plethora of mental health resources and nonprofits that'll be available on site to give you guys education and just a bunch of really valuable information for what they do, as well as all of these guys So come on out. It's free. It's from 12 to 5, August 31st at the Richmond Public Library. We are going to take a commercial break. And when we get back, we are going to jump into the world of Alien Covenant. We'll be right back.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Welcome back to Abyss Gazing, where we are chugging along on this Alien series, and we are talking about the second in what should have been a trilogy, which we'll talk about at some point, I'm sure, of prequels from Ridley Scott. This is Alien Covenant, and Billy has been quiet this entire episode. I'm shaking him out of it. Kick us off, my guy. Pick any point you want to talk about. Jumping.
So are we going to deal with David? Are we Walter? Which one are we right now? Because in this movie, there's a point to where you don't know which one's which. So, and come on, David, man, you killed her off and poisoned the whole planet. How'd you feel about that, guys? He flies their own ship, and they look like they're going to praise him, and he dumps their own poison on them.
It's kind of the ultimate god complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
To what there's like an old saying, like kill one person, you're a murderer. Kill 10, and you're a serial killer. Kill everybody, and you're a god. Like and that's kind of that's one of the themes throughout the movie. You know, who created the android and who created the creator. You know, so I think it kind of slightly plays into that thematically, you know.
And I think it's mentioned on there, kind of like the God complex between Walter and David. They did mention that in one of their scenes. They also mentioned how they learned from David and put more things into Walter to keep him from being as, I forget how they put it, but he's not as human-like or compassionate. He's more towards the android side.
Yeah. Also, too, like the opening of this film between Waylon and David, like I think speaks to what Tom was speaking about, where you see these these notions of like this Godplex kind of like sprinkled throughout. It's kind of like the ongoing theme of the movie, to where like there's that moment where like he's analyzing the longevity of Waylon's life, and he's like, you'll grow old and then you'll die and I won't.
Mhm.
And that is just kind of like echoed and like reverberated throughout the entire course of this. And I don't know if this like changes subjects or if this keeps it on, but this is, out of every Alien we've done so far, I think this is probably the most philosophical one.
Mhm.
Tom kind of noted at it with like, the complex of God, like, who was something we explored in Prometheus. The xenomorphs were created by the engineers, and the engine, who created the engineers? Well, if David the android was created by man, then who created man, kind of thing. And it's kind of woven throughout the course of this, even to the point where like the billy-crudip character is the first time that this franchise ever actually tackles the subject of faith, or having someone that has a discussion on faith. Well, what is the life past the mortality of man in this universe?
Mm.
They also touched on the God complex with David with the xenomorphs themselves, how if you pay attention and watch it, we watched out of order in my thought, because we should have probably watched Prometheus first. But but if you look at this one compared to all the ones we've seen, it shows how they started. They didn't start as the face hugger and bursting out of chests and everything. They even hinted at, I don't know if it was in the air where it went into his ear. That I know it didn't really show anything like that in the later movies or the earlier movies, however you want to look at it.
Later down the timeline.
Yeah, timeline later. But it did hint at that on this one. So it showed the different variations and stages of the aliens before they got to what we knew as Alien in the original Alien movie.
Mm.
Mark would be proud, right?
Yeah, he'll listen to this and he'll be proud. He'll fly out to Virginia just to pat you on the back.
Good job.
Also, on the Alien, when they first come down to the planet, and the first one that kind of comes to be born, I guess is the easiest way. It kind of came out as, to me, it came out like a primate. I don't know if it felt that way, but on the ground, going all four and everything, it wasn't standing up like a human. So again, that to me, I took that as like the way they were doing the evolution of the alien to get to what we know.
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting part of these two movies, Prometheus and Covenant, for me was always the android character. I think that's the most fascinating part. And I'm going to throw out a fan theory now, which I kind of subscribe to a little bit. And I don't know if you guys are aware of the idea that the prequel to the prequel to the prequel of the Alien movies is actually Blade Runner, and that and that Blade
Please
Runner,
lay it on me.
and that Blade Runner and Alien Ridley-Scott movies might actually exist in the same universe, and that the replicants portrayed in Blade Runner are actually early generations of the androids in Alien. And there's some there's little kind of sprinkles of Easter eggs to this theory, like the Wayland Corporation and things like this. They share the name in both movies. And then there's a even more extended one, which is more tenuous, that the Westworld series 1 and 2, the TV shows, are kind of prequels to the Blade Runner movies. And there's like very strong hints to do with Rickard's apartment and the apartments that are shown in series 2 of Westworld, so that these basic replicants in Westworld became the replicants in Blade Runner, and eventually evolved into the androids shown in Alien. And all three of these franchises, Blade Runner, they all kind of revolve around the idea of where does kind of human existence end and artificial intelligence become human. Like once they have the ability to procreate, or the ability to have original thought and feelings, is that the point at which they become human and autonomous? And does that make humans therefore God if we've created life? So they all kind of play around with those themes, like all three franchises.
I had never heard that before, and I really love that idea. Honestly, you can subscribe me to that idea as well. Let me know what you need in order for me to subscribe to it. But it's interesting because I feel like when you look at the majority of the android characters throughout the first 4 entries into this series, there isn't that much of an emphasis on them. They always kind of feel like side characters. And when you get to David and Walter here in Prometheus and Covenant, they have such a greater emphasis to where both films actually open up with the android characters, and they start to kind of really dive deep into these really questions that I think we all live with, like, like what is my limit as a man? What can I create? What can I destroy? What can I really do to craft and leave a legacy? And they're these really profound themes that all of us think about, maybe not every day, but at least, once a week or once a month. And they kind of echo throughout the course of these stories with, especially with the David and, why am I blanking on the guy's name? Billy, what's the other android's name?
Walter.
That's the one.
And I think they kind of touched on that. I mean, prior to this scene, but one of the scenes, the two of them were kind of discussing and arguing, and David's like, don't you feel love? You feel love for her? And Walter's like, I don't have feelings. I just don't have those. And he's like, why did you give up your arm? He's like, out of love. He's like, no, it was out of duty. So Walter was more duty driven and programmed based on that reaction, where David, when he was made in his programming from, I'm blanking on the name for his father, the one that created him out of the first
Peter Whalings.
Yeah. He created him more like a son and treated him like a son, so he would do more of what he wanted, and kind of like more corrupt to me than what Walter could be done. They've got more safeguards in now since they've had David.
How does everyone feel about an alien movie being so heavy on philosophy and less on like the xenomorphs and the action and horror that the franchise is famous for?
Oh, I think
sorry for it, Tom. What do you want to say?
Go. One of you two.
I thought it was a strange direction for this thing. There's plenty of ways to discuss all of these themes. I don't know. You're trying to expand the franchise. You're trying to expand the franchise in a different direction, I suppose. For me, the first film is so emblematic of the series as a whole, what it does. The fact that you don't see the creatures that much, and there's not too much revealed. The scarier the less you know about them. To really expand, flesh out the universe. To me, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know that it was a great choice. I feel that you could have done a space epic about crazy creatures without tying them into that same universe. Personally,
Tom.
So I think the first the first Alien was a horror movie. You
Yeah.
know, the original, it was a monster movie. The second one was a full-on action movie. You know, the third one was kind of like a kind of thriller, like a psychological thriller. It was, I think it was more focused on the human cast and the dynamic of where the prisoners were and their confines, and the environment they were in. And then we had a long gap between Alien 3 and Prometheus. And I think with Prometheus and the Covenant, it's kind of maybe some writers or directors that have grown up a lot and tried to get really clever, and had like a lot more to say. Because I think like the alternative, if you just made another straight action flick, it's kind of what are you then competing with? Avengers, you know? Like if you were just going to have like loads of big set piece battles between you know, super troopers and alien beasts, you know, like you know, bugs on a strange planet, like it's kind of, we've been there, we've done that, so where do you take it next? And I think it's a very confused film. I mean, Blade Runner was kind of like Ridley-Scott making an art house movie disguised as a science fiction movie. You know, and this feels something similar.
I agree with both of you guys. I think you guys both make really engrossing points that I want to hit on. You know, Leo talking about this film kind of almost grounding the terror of the first film, which is such a strange choice because I always go back to this argument, but there's an interview that John Carpenter did on the heels of Rob Zombie's remake. And if you've seen Rob Zombie's Halloween, you know that he like over explains like how Michael got all messed up as a kid and ultimately became a killer. And that completely strips it. Even when you look at Halloween 2, I love the Halloween franchise. I don't always agree with the directions that they take. But when you look at that first film, just it being a guy in a mask stalking people in suburbia, that's a terrifying concept. You don't need any direction. You don't need any reason. That's a terrifying concept. And going back to the OG Alien, and one of the things that made it such a groundbreaking film is the fact that you didn't know what the creature looked like. You didn't know where it was going to strike. You didn't understand how it moved or what it to go. But to take what should have been an entire trilogy, because before Fox bought Disney, this was greenlit as a trilogy. It seems like such a weird direction to go. And this movie makes so many weird choices, whether it's philosophy, the aforementioned flute sequence, the
aforementioned. We've not
Well, I
talked
talked about that.
We're coming back to it. But okay.
We're coming back to it, but I did mention it in passing. But it's also like it's film makes like really weird choices, like the fact that like there's a scene where Michael Fassbender as David kisses Michael Fassbender seems like such a weird thing, because like up to this point you believe that like David doesn't truly understand like what love is and why people love, and then he loves another android. Like I don't know, like this movie just kind of doesn't feel sure of it. And whereas I feel like with Prometheus seemed like it had good footing, it understood the story it was trying to tell and the direction it was going to. This one felt like people got upset that Prometheus was supposed to be an alien movie. The xenomorphs weren't in it very well, and so this feels kind of almost reactionary in how he delivers the story.
Yeah, do you know, Well, can we come back to the flute scene in a bit? I just want to mention because I hadn't seen this movie for quite a while. I saw it when it first came out, and I don't think I've watched it again since.
Same.
And I watched it today to prep for this. And Leo joked when I was talking to him earlier today about the flute scene, and I was kind of like, "What? Huh?" And then when I watched it, I was like, yeah, there's some serious homoeroticism going on here.
I'm glad I'm not making it up. Like it's a very gay film.
But did anyone else pick up on some of the stuff the captain says? Do you know the guy when the original captain gets killed and another guy takes over as captain? And there's a line when they first land on the planet, and he says, the reason that they didn't make me captain for this mission is because I'm a man of faith and I have religion. And that's why they wouldn't trust me to lead the mission in the first place. And that's like, they've written that and they've put it in there, and then it's just kind of like brushed off. It's not mentioned again, really, that he's religious. And then when he meets up with David later on, there's a line where he says, I met the devil when I was a child and I'm ready to meet him again. And that was like, to me, I can't remember the exact line, but it's saying, I've met the devil before. He visited me as a child. And is that an allusion to child abuse?
I had no idea what you meant. But I also thought they were going to follow up on that.
Somebody's written that and they've put that into the script and they've told the actor to say it, and it's a very odd line. Yeah. Like I met the devil when I was a child, and I recognize him when I see him, or something like that.
I'm not going to expand upon that ever.
and then they just kind of like move on to another section, and it's the same character, and he has this really stark line about being religious and people not trust him because of his faith. And then he makes this allusion to something that happened to him when he was a child and he met the devil, and they just move on again. And it's like, that really jumped out at me.
So there, to go piggyback off that, there is one other random line where it's him and someone else in the crew, and they're getting ready to like die or like have something that's scary, and she says something to the extent of, we could really use your faith now. And that's kind of it. Like, that's just kind of like it on a nutshell, where it's just like, it does seem like odd things, especially for something. When you look at this franchise, like this franchise is like essentially saying, hey, we're not alone in the universe, and the aliens that exist out there aren't these like friendly, weird creatures that are gray and want to probe you. No, they're terrifying, and they will lay eggs within you and then burst out of your chest and rewrite your DNA. And they're terrifying. And it seems like I agree. It seems like such an odd choice to make somebody a man of faith. But my thinking is that they're like, oh, well, we're talking about the mortality of man. So like, we have to have a character in here that is a man of faith, because those two themes occupy the same notion, which again, very strange.
Yeah. It just seemed oddly crowbarred into the script, like they really, like it was clunkily stuck into the script a little bit.
I really need to figure out who making this was gay. Was it the writer? Was it somebody who was very gay? Right? Because yes, okay, right. Let's just flutes. Right. Last time I mentioned them, flute scene, of course, extremely homoerotic. Kisses himself like later, like some gay men classically just love guys who look like themselves. But also, and then there's the fact that, okay, I can make this comparison, I suppose, but like what androids and gay people have in comparison is that they don't reproduce with their own partners. They can't do it. And so what David has an affinity for these aliens because there are ways for him to reproduce by proxy, but also he enjoys the idea of trivializing reproduction by deliberately infecting these people with aliens to have babies burst out of them and kill them, because I think the notion of reproducing with your own partner is held up in society as this beautiful, amazing, ultimate meaning of life, when in fact that's just something we've all chosen to believe that can be trivialized, questioned, and the film does this wonderfully with this extremely camp villain who thinks he can reinvent himself by like giving himself a haircut, like one of the messiest bitches in the universe.
Oh man.
Oh, also, and then finally, the fact that, you know, when he sticks these little embryos, he gets alien embryos in the end. He didn't have to like vomit them up as if it was like an eating disorder thing, right?
Yeah.
He could just have them in his pocket. So there's a lot of there's. It's strange that there's this like buried satanic symbolism, and then very overt homosexual symbolism going on. You know?
Yeah.
It's a real feast for the imagination.
So I'm asking this, could that be to counteract the faith and everything they're putting in to show the homosexualism and the what else did you just say? Dealing with the devil and things like that, where he's like full on devil? Could they be trying to show the two sides there, where David's the Antichrist, I guess, in another word? Maybe I'm reading into that, but they.
Do you know? I like. Do you know what I hadn't even considered, Leo, when you mentioned about like the gay stuff, like the fact that the android can't reproduce, and could that be one of the key themes there? Like,
well, I want to know from you, Tom, because you told me a little bit about Geiger's art and how it went into the first one, and I know that the first film is filled with imagery about like the horror of sexual organs, and certainly there's horror of reproduction in there, and I think this expands upon the horror of reproduction theme by bringing a gay element into it, at least from my reading.
Yeah, fun fact, when I was 12 years old, I went to a Forbidden Planet comic book shop.
Nice.
And they had on sale a huge book of Geiger's art. And I knew him from the Alien movies, and he'd made a computer game as well called Dark World or something like that. But I bought this book of his art, and I took it into school when I was 12 years old and got it out in an art lesson and said, like, hey, I bought this, isn't it cool? And like two teachers looked at it and absolutely lost their shit. Like, they seriously, and there was like a phone call home, and that and like there's, because some of his artwork, it's like definitely there's like I'm almost tempted to try and screen share it or something, because I sent Leo some of the stuff earlier today, but there's an early sketch of the xenomorph basically with a huge penis. And it's kind of holding the penis and pulling it above its own head. There's lots of them kind of entangled with women in kind of what looks like a sadomasochistic thing, but it's definitely all sexualized imagery that like Geiger like originally came up with. And loads of these sketches are just kind of like montages of penises and vaginas all kind of messed up together. Like do you know the walls in Alien, like when they're walking down the ships and it's all these kind of like living features, it's like that, but it's all just genitalia all over the place. And I just love the idea of like sending that to the art department at like Fox or Universal or whoever produced the first ones, and being like, yeah, the spaceship's not going to look like that, mate. It's not. We can't have them walking down like a corridor of dicks, you know?
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, I'd never. So when I invited you guys on to do this episode, Leo was like, "Oh, we got to talk about the flute scene." And I was like, I also, like Tom, hadn't seen this since the theater. Couldn't remember anything about it. Like, this cast, by the way, like, I love this cast. And there'd be like, the only thing I remembered about this was Danny McBride was in this movie. That was it. And I was like, oh, James Franco's in it. Billy-crudip. Oh, there's another android who why do I keep wanting to call him Wendell? What's his name, Billy?
Which one? Oh, Walter.
Walter. For some reason, I don't know. He looks like a Wendell. He's got the southern accent, so just I don't know. Anyway, like, so you just kind of keep seeing these things, and then like that was the only thing I remembered. And like watching it, I kept that in mind. And when the flute scene comes up and David is teaching Walter how to play, I was like, wow. Everything Leo said was like 100% correct. And then just like hearing you like break down like the analysis of this film just like made me see this, and I'm just like, wow. This is like the Batman and this is like the Batman and Robin of Alien movies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It goes on for longer than you remember as well. Are they still doing it? Oh my god. Yeah.
See, I had never seen this movie until watching it now. I thought I had, but I had never seen it. So I watched it like 2 or 3 times, and it's like, yeah, I could see what you were saying about the flute scene, because it threw me off at first. I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I just watched it wrong. And then some of the people in it, like was it Jesse Smollett? I know he was in Empire, but I can't remember if this was before or after there was a stunt he pulled. He was all over the news where he faked getting beat up or attacked.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a second.
Iconic behavior.
I've just got to run and turn the alarm off.
Sure.
So, yeah, like Josh was saying, there was a lot of actors in here that I started looking at, and I'm like, well, I know them from this show and that show. So, like, the main actress in this one was in Fantastic Beasts, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Yeah.
And he walked away at the wrong time because he was showing me the Harry Potter castle earlier.
Okay.
So,
yeah, it's like hearing you kind of talk about it. And like, this is the reason why I like doing podcasts, is because everyone has a different vantage point. Everyone comes from, different communities and different walks of life, and so to kind of see it through the lens of someone from the LGBT community, and for it to be like, oh yeah, like this is completely homoerotic, and what it's trying to do, and like its themes, like is fascinating. Kind of gives me a little bit more appreciation for this movie. Because
me too, rewatching it.
Yeah, like I just was like, I mean, it's a movie that I feel like is very like meh. Like I don't hate this movie. I don't love this movie. It's just kind of like very like as middle of the line as you can get.
Yeah, I mean, but this movie trying to connect to Alien, I really do think you need that trilogy, like you were saying earlier, that it feels like something's missing to connect them. I mean, you can see where it's starting to go, where like you mentioned, where he had the eggs, he put in the incubator and things like that, and he had her go into the cryogenic sleep, but it feels like there's something missing between this movie and Alien.
Also, how does everyone feel about the fact that, like, I'd also, before I ask this question, I don't know, this is just how I viewed it this time watching it, but it almost kind of feels like you were saying, Billy, coming off of that Ridley Scott and the writers almost kind of position David as the main antagonist instead of the xenomorph. Like, it feels like when the xenomorph burns up, the film should have ended there. And then they were like, psych, we're going to do this Walter David switcheroo. And that's going to be like, they kind of position him to be kind of, because we spend the majority of our time with David. It feels like this is his movie and not an alien movie.
And it goes back to the point that they were hitting on earlier, where David kind of feels like the parent or the father, I guess, of the aliens themselves, just because he brought them and he kind of kept them alive by bringing in the eggs. I guess it's the easiest way to say it. What do y'all think about that? Does that make sense? Or
that last part was the only, like, this is, I rewatched the film. Two things I could remember. Let's say it again, flutes, of course. But then also the twist at the end was one of the only things that I remembered about the film. So I think it was valuable, and I think it's interesting to look at these aliens as just a force doing what they do. They're just like primal nature hunters. But in this case, they're a power that gets into the wrong hands. That was an interesting new view of it. But certainly, this is a film with a whole bunch of producers or rewrites or something that sent it in 5 different directions. It's very difficult to understand what it's trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, what Josh mentioned about, I think you mentioned it, about David being the main character. It's kind of like, is he? You know, like 40 minutes into that movie, who is the main character? I guess David's the one we see right at the start. I know it's the other one, isn't it?
it's Walter.
Yeah, it's Walter, and then we see David at the very end. But I still think like 40 minutes, an hour into the movie, it's more like you're watching a group of people rather than kind of one person's perspective on this group of people and this experience. So I don't think there is really a central character. And you know, at the end, when there's the couple making love in the shower, and the alien kills them both while they're in the shower, you almost have this sense of like, who were they again?
Definitely, yeah.
It was just 2 other Starship Troopers just trooping, and then like stopping for a second. And like, they were like the two of the survivors who got taken out right at the end. And even at other points when they're like making their last stand, as like Danny McBride's coming to save them, there's like the guy who's like, you know, getting ready, and you're like, who was he again? He was just one of the other ones.
What Danny McBride's character is called, because that was just Danny McBride in an alien film.
Was he not called like Tex or something? Like
Tennessee.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like,
Sure.
We'll call him Tennessee and give him a cowboy hat.
Or
That's
T.
It's all the backstory you need. Like,
Also, like, were 3 of them there with their wives?
Yes.
That's a bit random. It's like a couple's trip.
Which it's also the first time that you see it in this entire series, because when you look at the company and specifically how the company operates, as we kind of see in later sequels, it's random. Whereas in this one, it's like, oh yeah, we have 3 couples that just happen to be together. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and they're all the crew. They're not like one of them's in the crew and one of them's a colonist. The couples are all in the crew. So
I wouldn't authorize that, and I've got no knowledge how they pick those teams, but that's not happening.
Was there any work getting done?
Not to your knowledge.
There's a whole lot of nagging going on the final. There's a lot of man hours going into that.
No. So I got to bring this up because I'm bringing it up in the spirit of Mark not being here. He brought up in our chat about the fossification of the xenomorphs, and what was he saying, between this time frame and the Alien movie?
Yeah.
Is that what he was saying, Josh?
Yeah.
And he didn't understand how they did the falsification in that amount of time frame. Y'all got any ideas on that? Or go ahead.
I think you hit it earlier, where it doesn't feel like the story's complete, and it feels like there should have been another entry point to where we had Prometheus, we had Covenant, and then there was a proposed third film before the Disney buyout. And that third film should have bridged the gap to where if this is 10 years between Prometheus and Covenant,
Right.
then there should have been, because I think it's like a 40-year age. So even if we got to see 20 years beforehand, before the events of Alien, it still would have made that feel a lot more like a smoother transition. Whereas at the end of this one, it's, David coughs up 2 xenomorphs, eggs, and puts them into the their little pod fertilization thing, and that's the end of that. It feels forced.
It feels unfinished to me.
Yeah,
so.
unfinished. That's the word I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was saying in the group chat, though, even if they did do the other movie, it feels like the xenomorphs' time moves different for them. Just think about how, 48 hours, 24 hours, they go from being ingested to being born, basically. So that feels like if they can go that quick in just being born, the falsification may go quicker also, because it just moves different for their species.
Yeah, I mean, there's and I think you could there's the acid for blood, what happens when they actually grow old and stop living. There's something about their actual biology speed up that process. Right. But the biggest gap between this movie and the first Alien movie for me is okay, so there's the alien eggs and things, but what about this David guy?
Mm-hmm.
What becomes of him? How's he kind of taken out of the picture? So yeah, and we might still get it somewhere down the line. They might still make that movie yet.
So one of the things that's really fascinating about looking at the bridge between Covenant and the 79 entry point into the series is also going off of that, Tom, is the big twist with Rook being the android was that he quite literally bled and oozed. And at what point in the mythology is that introduced? At what point does David return to wherever the colonization happened? Is he's still floating out there? Does he have information that the colonization needs? I think that's probably a point that I hadn't considered until you brought it up, and now my brain is just kind of going crazy with multiple different possibilities of what could have happened.
Yeah, and that was the point earlier I was saying was unfinished, because it just, even though it's supposed to be, and I know you said there's a third one, it just doesn't feel connected because there's so many things wide open and not explained that need to happen between this movie and the 79 movie.
Also, this is a really random point, but in regards to our first meeting with David, why is it never established that he can his hair can grow? Because I'm just thinking that every other android's it's kind of the equivalent of one of these modern day sex dolls. They come, their hair stays at just an appropriate length. That's it. It never grows. But with David, his hair grows long. How is that never touched on?
For what purpose did they give him that? No, you're absolutely right. I think that he started his own resort planet where he just cloned himself endlessly, and then him and the other little Davids get into little groups and they bitch and body shame about all the other Davids, That's why you didn't see him. He just became so obsessed with himself and the quality of all the other Davids.
And that's why I thought he kissed Walter, because he was obsessed with himself, that he saw himself in Walter just because of the way he looked.
Yep.
Hmm.
And also, like, at what point does Waylon get away from the model of David and start to go into the other ones that we've seen, like Rook or the I can't remember the one from like Aliens, but like there are like multiple different ones that you see. But in this duology of stories, David is kind of like the poster child for like what all the androids look like.
Yeah, but you got to remember, this one was based off Wayland, where what he created, where the one in the 70, was it 79? Yeah, because that's the same one that went through most of the first couple. They hit on that because the real life guy showed up before she swan dived. It was based off him.
That's in the second and third one.
Okay. So, but
that's
I mean,
hold on. Like, continue.
But you know which one I'm talking about. So is it that when they start progressing, they're basing it off different people by their creator?
Lance Hendrickson, that's the guys. I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
It's horror royalty right there. Want to make sure that I get that name right. Don't come at me. But it's Lance Hendrickson. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good point. But again, the Lance Hendrickson character was like tit for tat, like the same exact guy. Whereas when you look at like the opening sequence of this movie, Guy Pearce looks nothing like Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe going back to Leo's examination of this film, maybe it's like a continued like homoerotic idea where like Waylon like designed like what he thought would not only be like the perfect like body, but like potentially like perfect like suitor as well.
That makes sense. I'd also like to point out that it's not Dave, it's David.
That's
David.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I thought I said David.
David. No, you did, but just
Okay, all right, cool.
I was like,
he would. I'm saying David would never retract it. It's not Dave from my closest friends. It's always David.
He did make
Walter,
that point.
Walter, right? Yes. Not Walt. No. Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah. I don't really know what else to say about this film. Is there anything else that anyone else wants to bring up? Any other theories? Any other?
I'm glad I picked it. It was a good one to rewatch. I had a lot of fun talking about it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a fun film. It's a little bit misguided in some parts, but it's a good time. I don't know. Billy, you got any last thoughts?
No, it's like I said. I think it really was hurt by not being a trilogy versus what it is, where it's just the two movies.
So this is an interesting story, an interesting idea that I'm curious about, and this is where we'll leave off before we get into social media. If this is a trilogy, where do you take the story from here? Because there's almost a portion of it that feels like this is like the perfect ending for the David character, but yet after this discussion, like there's so much more of that unanswered questions that you have at the same time.
I mean, to me, if you're going and you're taking this movie and trying to bridge it to the 79 movie, you would explain what happened to David and how the aliens got where they are versus leaving it exactly like they are right now, where they're basically embryos or whatever you want to call them. And David's running the ship and everybody's in cryogenics.
I like to think that like David finds a planet and just kind of builds this entire planet around like his ego and like raises the xenomorphs, and then at the end he dies by the hands of the xenomorphs, and then they go back into space.
And all the colonists are his sacrifices to get the xenomorphs?
Yes.
That would be the only way to do that.
I think the only logical extension of this film is to have John Waters direct the next one and get maybe some different colored xenomorphs. They're also drab, these ones.
God.
Make them sing.
But it's,
A
I mean, it's
musical.
Make it a musical because Mark will hate it. Mark,
They
make it a
did.
musical.
They did make an Alien musical, so that is a thing.
but it's, do you know Alien Romulus that's coming out like
Oh, yeah.
soon? Does that fit in between these two movies, or is it just not something else?
It's
So
between this one and Aliens.
Yeah.
So the first two, it's in between those.
Huh.
It's in between the first two.
And we're and everybody listen to podcast. We'll be covering that one next week.
Yes, with our friends, So Much Hope. Yes, yeah. So it's supposed to take place between Alien and Aliens.
Okay.
But there are touches to Prometheus and Covenant. I've seen it. Mark's seen it. Billy has not.
I'm going to watch it now. I'm going to be on that tonight.
All right. Well, I think that might be it for us on this episode of Abyss Gazing. But one more time before we go, if you guys want to check out Meet Leo and Tom in person, check out a curation of their films. You get a chance to August 31st, 12 to 5 at the Richmond Public Library on East Franklin Street, right here in Richmond, Virginia. This is the first time we've ever done this, and I believe this is the first time that they've ever had something happen like this for them as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Huge honor. Huge honor.
Nothing even close.
So I, as a programmer, am really extremely proud of to present this to everyone, and really hope you guys come out. Like I said, it kicks off at 12. We're going to have Leo and Tom in attendance with us. We're going to have a bunch of mental health resources and local organizations coming out to provide resources as well. It's going to be an open discussion, open celebration of not only mental health, but also at the same time, celebration of independent films. Leo, Tom, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at leo-x-robertson. I'm on Facebook and X. Easy to find. Please do look me up. Say hi.
Yeah, on Instagram, I think I'm called Tom Soundwave. On Facebook, I'm Tom Montgomery Music, and on X, I think I'm just Tom Montgomery as well on X. So yeah, no fancy clever names. Just
Also,
Tom Montgomery everywhere.
He's also
YouTube,
on Spotify.
Tom Montgomery. Yeah, Spotify, Tom Montgomery. Yeah.
I've had so many people that like make music as just kind of like a hobby on here, and they always forget to plug their Spotify, and I'm always like, no, go listen, go check it out. It's a fun time. It's very relaxing. It's great music. Billy, where can people find you online?
Of course, you can reach out to me at Letterboxd at VABoy99.
And I am also on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can find Abyss Gazing wherever you guys get your podcast from. So just look up Abyss Gazing, hit subscribe, and join us next week when we talk about Alien Romulus, concluding our Alien series before Surprise September. And we've got some interesting surprises for you guys. But you guys can find our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, where you can support our mental health education efforts, and wherever you guys get your podcast from, just search Victims and Villains, or go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can get more information on next week's events, more podcasts, movie reviews, our mental health resource library, and more. But until next time, remember, the longer that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.